So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're showing up from. What a pleasure to have you all here today. Hello, Louise. So nice to see your faces, those that are here. Hey, Andrea, nice to see you. Hope things are good in Hungary. So what a pleasure to see everyone. And thank you for coming to have a conversation with us about our latest course that we are putting together. It's not as much a place of coaching, maybe coaching thought, but it has a great deal to do with business and human resources and leaderships of all types. So I'm not going to keep you here long today, but Charles is going to be my left hand or right hand man, and he will be working the chat for me and the recording. Charles will also be taking any questions after today. We'll have a question and answer at the end, but Charles will be your contact person to actually discuss the course that we're doing. And we're really happy to be able to start presenting some of this, the work that we're doing. It has grown out of the requests that we've had from some professional development with the government of British Columbia, with the Fraser Health here, with some of the Wet'suwet'en, the Anishinaabe First Nations that are trying to bring compassionate leadership into their workforces. And for those of you on the call that are trauma-informed coaches or that work in trauma, we all know the importance of such a feat. So thanks for being here supporting this conversation in that respect. And what I'd like to do, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Brad Hardie, and I am a co-founder and for Moving the Human Spirit, and we specialize in trauma-informed coursework, trauma-informed initiatives, and I do that with my business partner, Susan Hogarth, who happens to be on the line today. And some of you would know her because she mans the fort at head office to talk to some of the people that come through to see how they may put trauma-informed forward in their businesses and their practices. So let's have a look at what we will be discussing today. We also have Tanya on our course today. She will be, I'm going to initiate this course at the beginning, but our hope is that she will be happy enough to take it off my hands at some point and move forward with it. So you have a few of our facilitators that are going to be working with us. And what do they say? I think you've got the best of us right now today. So let's have a look at what we're doing here. I want to honor everyone's time. Again, we'll have a question and answer at the end of it. So we're going to be looking at this new course called Compassionate Leadership, and it is working with trauma and adversity. And the reason that we've developed this particular course for business professionals, human resources, and for leaders of all types is because we're finding more and more people who are working in environments, offices, collectives are finding that trauma is starting to present itself. And certainly over the years with COVID and with some of the new developments globally in the world, especially with our neighbors down to the south, who, yes, yes, Joy. And so we are holding space for people to be able to move in directions. And of course, in other areas, I know Andrea from Hungary does a lot of work. There's lots of work to be done there. Yuki and Brad, of course, there's so much work to be done around trauma informed. There's Anne. Hello, Anne. Good. So let's look at this from a perspective of having a conversation. And what I wanted to do is just open up with a few questions. And I thought about what that might be. One of them is, what if we could transform the way we lead by understanding the science of trauma? I know as a business mindset, one of the things that we do is that we want to see specifics, we want to see details, we want to see information. One of the ways we do that is going through a scientific approach. Sometimes when we think about moving into areas of trauma, it makes us wonder if we can hold the capacity to work within the trauma lens. So what if we could transform the way we lead by understanding the science of it? And that's really what this course is part about, the neuroscience of what happens and also how we can deal with it. The other question I pose for you to think about as we move through this today is, what if compassionate leadership could be the antidote to workplace stress and adversity? So really something to consider as we move through today. Um, There we go. So today's overview is that we want to just look a little at impact of trauma. And this is going to be a very brief overview. I know some of you have already gone into the trenches when it comes to trauma and understanding it, knowing what's going on. Today, what we're going to do for some of our new viewers and some of what the capacity of this course is going to be moving forward, we want to just look at impact of trauma. What does that mean to us as leaders? We want to look at the neurobiology of trauma. We want to think about the ACE framework and how that affects us. We want to think about the compassionate leadership practices and some of the safety and cultural sensitivities that we want to take into the workplaces. As leaders, I think it's a responsibility for us. I always love the comment, you have to create an environment as a leader for people to succeed. You can't just expect them to do that. So we need to create that environment for them to succeed. So by the end of our 40-minute chat, I hope that we'll think about some practical strategies to lead with compassion. I thankfully know a lot of people on the call today, and I know how compassionate and empathetic they are. Certainly the ones that I have brushed up against. Creating a trauma-informed workplace culture. You know, that's something we've talked about for years. Susan worked tirelessly trying to create trauma-informed culture at schools and for gifted children. And there has always been a bit of a restriction on that. And I don't say that in a negative way, but I think it was the wrong time, wrong place. And hopefully that will change, because I think the earlier that we're able to work with people, i.e. our children, and make them feel safe and move into a trauma-informed culture, not that I want them to feel that all the time, but we want them to be able to have emotional intelligence and emotional resilience so that they're able to cope with things that come up. The other one is we're just going to have a little bit looking at techniques for creating psychological safety. And sometimes people don't realize the impact that we have. My dear friend Nadine used to say, you never realize how lightly, you never touch anyone so lightly that you don't leave imprint. So to think about that, what types of psychological safety are we actually creating? So trauma is that response or emotional response to distressing events. We know that. It's not so much that the person is experiencing something that's happening to them in the environment. It's that the coping skills that they have are not adequate enough to be able to respond in a way that is going to assist them moving forward. So the other thing that happens, it affects mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Well, if any of you have worked in environments with several people, I know I've worked in environments on boards, on different types of implementations of over 300 people. And what ends up happening is eventually something occurs, something comes up. And the second thing that happens is how the staff handle it. What capacity do they have to be able to handle something? So where are they at mentally? Where are they at emotionally? And where are they at physically? Meaning, where's their nervous system? Where's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic reacting? And we want to move them into a space of feeling comfort. We want to be able to move them in a place of feeling safe, because those are the places that conversations that we want to have with our employees, with the people that we lead, with the people that we are in relationship with. We want to have that safety. Adversity and trauma have lasting effects. It's interesting, I was reading recently that adversity is something that maybe almost every person experiences. So we've all come up against challenging times in our lives, whether it's when we've been in school, when we've been studying post-secondary, or sometimes in work. And it certainly happens throughout our ages. You know what I have the capacity to withstand now, I didn't have when I was younger. But at this wonderful age, I can withstand much more than I used to be able to withstand. So an interesting thing, World Health Organization, May 27th, talked about 70% of people globally will experience a potentially traumatic event during their lifetime. So that's a pretty high number. If that was a school score, you would be well beyond pass. So thinking about thinking about the level of people that are impacted by trauma and the elevation of what happens in environments. Some of the recent courses that we were delivering, I heard a lot of managers and leaders talk about the effect of conflict within the workplace and what happened when they came up. And as leaders and managers, what we're doing is we're trying to mitigate what happens because we have laws and practices in place. And they're good. They're good to have in place. But what happens in the situations where we have one employee and another employee in conflict, and who knows what other things are coming up for them? And when I mean other things, we talk about the ACE, the childhood experiences. What coping mechanisms have they learned from their childhood that are now presenting as an adult? And the interesting thing about it is that that can happen very psychologically. We don't understand or realize that those things are presenting themselves sometimes, especially when we're caught in the hijacking of the amygdala and we don't know what is going on. So when we think about being in this place where we're working with people who are elevated, where they're moving into their fight, flight, freeze response, where we can't have logical conversations. And that makes sense because all organisms are constantly sorting for safety. And we do that at work too. We do it when we leave in the morning, when we get up in the morning. We're all constantly sorting for safety. And we're at a level where we don't notice it anymore. But that's what organisms do. But that's how we survive. We move into fight, flight, or freeze. So if you think about this happening in a space of leadership and management, what do we do in response to one of our employees or one of the people that we lead being in a fight or a flight or in that freeze response? How much conversation do you think we're able to have with that person? So when trauma hijacks the decision making and the emotional regulation, for those of you that are familiar with the amygdala hijacking, which is a neuroscience label, so we're looking at how our sympathetic nervous system comes into our body, hijacks our prefrontal cortex, which is our center for logical thinking, and where the thalamus takes over with emotion. I don't know why you're so emotional about what happened at work. I don't know why you're reacting in this way. Well, they're reacting because they're sorting for safety. We all need food, shelter, clothing, and relationship to survive. So, of course, when that's threatened, we are going to move into a space of emotional reaction. So the interesting thing for us, if you are a neuroscience geek like me, is that the brain can adapt and heal. So it has that adaptation, which I love. Now, I think about everything that we do through life, and if you, again, are anywhere near science, we know that we've been adapting and evolving for years. And it's no different when it comes to how we can work with individuals in our leadership practices. We're still able to work from this place of understanding. It's not a bottom line of dollar. It's not a thing that you have to do the work or you leave. We want to understand why they're affected, what's showing up in the environments we're working in, and how we might be able to mitigate some of that. It's interesting. I was reading an article from WPI Economics, and they did a study around, it's in the UK, and they were doing a study around how many people would consider leaving work if the stress levels got high. And they discovered that 78% of people would consider quitting due to high stress levels. So for me, when I think about that as a manager, as I think about that from someone that looks at the well-being of a company, I really think that's a very high number. And why do I think it's a high number? Well, I also look at the books. Susan and I are constantly managing where we're at with what is happening in the company. And as a result of it, what we're trying to avoid is high turnover. We're also looking to make sure that we don't have a low morale. Because if we had a low morale in what we did, then we wouldn't have people that wanted to come along on this journey with us. We have increased workplace conflicts. Susan and I both used to work for a company called Lee Hatch Harris Knightsbridge. And what they were is they're an EA company. And we would go in when people were getting fired. And it was interesting that a lot of the firings, and I say this not lightly, were developing because of increased workplace conflicts that they couldn't resolve. And of course, we used to talk about it after the fact over a glass of wine and think, wow, if they just had better communication tools and actually understood how the human body works and what people really need to survive, wouldn't that number adjust itself? But call us dreamers. There's also this thing of lack of trust. What happens in an environment when trust is lost? We have more conflict. The interesting thing about losing trust in a work environment, I don't know if you've ever been in one that's happened. You spend your entire time watching for reason of why you don't trust people. And it becomes this self-sabotaging routine for us. Here we are. See, I told you, I knew I shouldn't have trusted them. I just saw them go into the manager's office. I can tell they're going in to talk about me. They're probably going to go on about that extra coffee I had at 10:32. So we develop this environment where there's no communication, there's no openness, there's a lack of trust, there's increased work conflict because of poor communication, which leads to what? Low morale. Ah, just got, Susan just got fired. I'm scared now. How's my job? What am I going to do? I better spend this afternoon looking on the computer when no one's watching and update my resume. So we move into this high turnover. So you can flip this pyramid either way. The other interesting thing for me, I know Brad's going to nod his head yes, is that if we think we leave our child at the door when we move into work or when we move into being an adult, we don't. Everything, all the experience, whatever has happened to us comes with us. And some days we feel like that child sitting in the office, sitting in the meeting. So adverse childhood experiences impact long-term health and well-being. And it's interesting, people oftentimes don't want to talk about it. I'm happy to talk about it because if I know what's going on, then I have a course of action. We can't resolve what we don't know. It's why we think that the work that we do is valuable because there are places, especially when it comes to these maladaptive behaviors. COVID was a prime example of people moving into a space where they were doing things that they hadn't done in years or that they didn't even recognize they did in years. Clients were saying, I have no idea what's going on with me. I actually hollered at someone in a lineup. I actually got angry at the gas station. I'm being aggressive toward people. Well, what happened was our basic safety was taken away. We were told to stay away from our family, not trust our neighbor. Groceries were going to be rationed. We had to survive. What did we do? We went into survival mode. Every time we went out, it was like running the gauntlet. We stayed home. Wait, too much bread and dessert. Well, I did. And we were there doing this work, wondering what happens. Why am I being so angry? Well, it's a basic instinct and it comes from childhood behaviors. If you didn't feel safe when you were young, you made up different types of behaviors to make sure that you were safe. And some of those are now representing themselves. They've been dormant for years. COVID brought them all back. Caring about self, not thinking about other. Conflicts. not trusting other people. It divided some families. Interesting, hey? But it comes out of safety. It's not because they dislike, it's not because they hate, it's because they don't feel safe. Safety makes us do very interesting things. So you can think about this in a work environment. I don't know if any of you heard of this, but I've had a great deal of clients come back and say, I don't want to go back to work. I feel so unsafe. I don't want to return. I like my new life, my new normal. Which is also difficult for us because we are social animals. What do we do when we lose our socialization? Becomes the Lord of the Flies again. It's interesting. So, what do we think about when we want to try to manifest this place of compassionate leadership? We want to lead with empathy, trust, and awareness. So think of that question at the beginning. If we had the science, if we develop the trust and awareness, what does that do for us as people, as leaders, showing up in front of others? Demonstrate what you want. When I talk to people, clients that are confused, and I'm not a parent, but they talk about parenting and how difficult it is. And I think about that as a leadership quality. And the reality is, what we want to do is we want to show up as the person that we want them to be. And for me, it's no different as a leader. If I'm leading people, I want to show up for the person that I want them to be. I want to create that environment for them to feel safe, to prosper, to be able to collaborate with guidance. The other thing to think about is compassion is not a weakness. That's such an old man's club thing to think about. Compassion is not a weakness. It's strategic leadership. And we know that now. We're confronted with even more obstacles. And compassion is what's needed for us to move forward. And how will we get that if we don't demonstrate it? If we don't show people how to be compassionate? Teach someone how to fish, they will fish. Teach someone compassion, or better still, give it to them, and they will give compassion. The other thing we want to know about core leadership principles, and these are common across the board. Sometimes I wake up and think we just stop thinking about the logical things. And those are self-awareness, empathy, connection above all, making the time to see our people and understand what's going on for them. And of course, that psychological safety that we talked about. If I don't feel safe, I'm not going to share with you. I'm not going to support the information that could change things in our relationship because I don't trust. So really making that psychological safety can do what? Well, it furthers the connection. And then we can move into empathy. And what does that give us? If we can set in those three areas, it gives us self-awareness. What's self-awareness? Self-awareness is growth. It's moving forward when we feel like we can't. It's being in the stuck place and realizing that there's more to this than just us. And as a compassionate leader, what do we do in practice? You don't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. We want to show up vulnerable and authentic. I have flaws. I'll be the first to admit them. That's my vulnerability and authenticity showing up. As a matter of fact, I don't want to be perfect because perfect is a symptom of something way deeper that's not healthy. So I want to sit in this place of vulnerability and authenticity. That's what compassionate leaders do. Then your people relate to you. Encourage self-care and mental well-being. We have to demonstrate that. Provide constructive feedback. Learn how to give feedback as a cooperative communication, not as a have to, must do. And have regular check-ins with your people. That's how we lead. As much as you want to know where they're at with projects, they want to know where you're at with what's going on. So it's so important to do that. Have those regular check-ins. And what does that support? Well, it supports this: safety, connection, empathy, and self-awareness. I can't tell you how important psychological safety is, especially nowadays. So many people aren't as safe as they thought they were. Other people already knew they weren't safe, and now that things are demonstrating that they're not safe. So psychological safety and a culture of sensitivity is more important now than it's ever been for us. I know we'll make it. I know that we're human. I know that we will adapt and evolve and grow. We always do. It just feels hard right now. So we really want our employees to feel safe to express themselves. Set up guidelines about expression. How do we talk about things? Have courses that help your employees have hard discussions with you, with the rest of their counterparts. Psychological safety increases innovativeness and engagement. If I feel safe, I'm going to try to give you the best of me that I can. If I don't feel safe, I'm going to give you just enough to get that paycheck and go home. Innovation happens when everyone's on board, not just when one or two of us are. And cultural awareness creates inclusion. This idea that we weren't all humans and that we're all different, caste, deregulation, less than, more than, it drives people like us nuts because we're all, at the end of the day, human. And that's what we should be focused on. A cultural awareness that creates inclusion. Biologically, we all need, want, love, peace, respect. That I always hold on to. It's the best piece of us. Conflict resolution with compassion. Unresolved trauma can escalate workplace conflict. We've talked about that. Approach conflict with curiosity and non-judgment. In November, the organization that we worked with was conflict management. We talked a lot about this. How do I help all the parties that are involved feel safe and like I'm listening? Ask more questions. Get curious about what's happening. Let them self-resolve some of what's coming up. Use active listening and clear communication. Don't take it on as what you need to do as a leader. Assist them with how they resolve their own problems, issues, conflicts. We call that self-sustaining. We want to make them able to do this work as well. We're not the parent. We're the partner. So I really am thinking about these in honoring our time today. I'm really thinking about these key takeaways that we have. So we know that trauma affects behavior and workplace performance. No brainer. It's simple. It can't not, because we know trauma affects everything in our lives. So how can it not affect workplace performance? What happens at home, leave it at home. We don't do that. We can't do that. We're not built that way. We carry everything with us all the time. It's the wholeness of who we are. And if we can't have that in our workplace, then we're not productive. We don't feel safe. Again, I talk about safety all the time. It's all we do all the time, subconsciously. Compassionate leadership creates resilience and trust. That's why we're doing this invitation to talk about compassionate leadership. We want to start building resilience and trust within these places. We want leaders that understand what's going on biologically, mentally, physically, psychologically. I want a leader like that. I don't want someone that just looks at me like a number and a dollar sign. Psychological safety and cultural sensitivity, which drives success. If we can play together, we stay together. What do we do as leaders? Well, start with self-awareness. Find out what you don't know that you don't know. Have self-awareness with yourself. How do I show up? Evaluate. How open am I to these conversations? Am I supportive? Am I not supportive? Who am I showing up for and why? Who are the stakeholders? And what do I want to accomplish? And do those align with my values and beliefs? So simple. If anything aligns with your values and beliefs, you can move a mountain. Implement trauma-informed policies. It's not a horrible thing. We're talking about trauma. Let's use it to our advantage. Call it anything else you want. Awareness, understanding, developing, whatever you need. I know trauma is getting a bit tired. We want to be out of it. But unfortunately, it's not going away yet, and it's the only reference we have. So think about the policies that we put in place. And of course, above all, what we're doing with this course is that we want people to be able to develop a compassionate leadership culture. What a wonderful thing to do. Are you going to the compassionate leadership culture meeting on Friday morning at 10 in the staff room? Yeah, I am. They're going to have free donuts. So having that conversation, making it happen, the first steps. So now comes a little bit of what we're selling, of course, because everything has the attachment. And really why we do that is because we want to get this work out here. This new program we have, this is geared towards business professionals. And we have 18 CP, HR, CCEs attached to it for those of you who might be in HR or business professionals. On the right hand, you'll see a little bit about what we're going to cover in the course itself. So trauma defined, levels of impact. We're going to go much further into adverse childhood experiences. We're going to go through neuroscience, autonomic nervous system, brain science. Lots of you here may know about this. I recognize some of you as our associates and students. So brain science, again, the neurobiology of trauma, perception of reality, which is so important in leadership work, understanding people's perception of reality, understanding labels, why language matters, understanding conflicts. How do we work in states of conflicts? Why is the language that we use matter so much to people? Mostly because it's how we communicate, except for physically. Perceptual positions, psychological safety. We're going to talk a lot about psychological safety when it's combined with cultural, historical, and gender sensitivity. Conversations on ethics. How do we do this ethically? The interesting thing about this course, and some of you may have taken the other courses that we've had case studies in, this course reflects on case studies. So it's really fun. So we get to do case studies, and then that generates quite an elaborate conversation for people. Lori Hillis can concur with that. She's often quite case study heavy when she's in our courses with us. Good. Resilience and strength-based approach. That's what we're working on in this course, and building compassionate leadership. And it's something that I think we can all consider. Somatic awareness, of course, we'll talk about grounding techniques, and we'll also cover personal wellness. And it is the one that we're doing is February the 25th to April the 7th. We have a code going on right now until February the 7th that'll save you $250. These are in Canadian funds, so if you're in the US, I think that cost you $75 last time I checked the exchange. So if you are looking for more CCEs for your development, or if you're looking for how to actually move through your work life or lead your people in a compassionate leadership way, we invite you to come to this place. And we'll have a few questions and discussions beforehand, though. I just want to make sure that you have Charles's email, which he will put in the chat, and to think about the code. But Charles will be able to answer other questions. But for today, what I'd like to do is really invite some of your input. And I will stop talking and thank you for being here. And let's go with any questions people might have. Does anyone have any questions that might be outstanding for them? Pull up chat in case there has been. Yeah, Lenka.
This is really interesting information. My question is, I understand the premise of the ACE scores. At what point does it become something that is a collective trauma that, let's say it's an event or some type of broad scale trauma? How does that work? Is that ever separate from ACE scores in terms of how communities deal with things?
Tell me just a little bit more because I like your question.
Yeah, so from what I understand, the ACE score can contribute to how you deal with things as an adult. But
Right.
in cases like wildfires or broad scale conflicts, if a whole community is impacted, at what point does that affect people beyond what you would think the ACE score would determine?
Perfect, got you. So
Okay.
it's kind of two different things. So if we're talking about natural disaster, what we're talking about in some instances is acute trauma. And what acute trauma is it's those one-ofs. So think of wildfires such as LA. Think about, we had the same thing here in British Columbia. We did a workshop with Community Futures after the wildfires up in our area called Kelowna. So those to us are called acute traumas. So think about an acute trauma, and then I'm going to say, what does the ACE have to do with an acute trauma or have to do with a complex or chronic trauma? So what the ACE score has to do with it is the socioeconomic, the philosophy and spiritual sides, and the what the traumatic event was. And the reason that the ACE plays into that is because we're looking at how the child was raised when they were small, what coping mechanisms their parents taught them, or if they felt safe, what socioeconomical things were present for them, could they access healthcare, mental health, any of those things. So if we see someone with a score that's high, that means that some of those things weren't in place. So we're talking about children that may have lived through war-torn countries. We're talking about children that would have been in abusive relationships with their caregivers. They may have come from a place where there was family members that have suicided or been jailed, drug addictions, alcoholism. So a child, what they do because their emotional development is not complete until about the age of 30, a child is only sorting for safety, and we oftentimes confuse what's happening in the environment that our parents don't love us. My parents are fighting because they don't love me. I've done something wrong here. I'm the fault of them fighting. Um, they're uh, they're numbing. They love me at one minute when they're drunk, high, stoned. The next minute they are hollering at me. So we learn mechanisms to be able to sort for safety in those environments. Then we hopefully grow up a bit more stable. But anytime we're confronted with something, what happens is those old mechanisms come into play. If we've not learned what's happening in our body, how to have emotional intelligence, how to deal with emotional maturity, and how to interact and communicate with people. So if we don't quite know what's going on for us, which is often the state in trauma, we have an experience and our body does something that we can't control, which is really, it's doing exactly what it was built for. That feels really scary. So that's where we see panic attacks, anxiety disorders, depression in older age, because they're experiencing some of those feelings, if you will, the reminders, or people call them triggers. I like to call them reminders or being evoked. and it's coming up for them and they're like, I don't know what's going on. And a lot of the time, those are attached to the mechanisms that we have, or I should say, not mechanisms, the behaviors that we've learned to stay safe. Run and hide, that's flight. Stand up and cry, scream, that's fight. And as children, that's what we did to try to stay safe. So that's where the connection is there. So we can see it through all of them. And then counterbalance to that, we are looking at people that have gone through, say, maybe society that culturally they were, I don't want to say raised up, but I want to say we're more fluent in all kinds of ways: money, stature, uh, education, health, all of the things were given to them. And they sometimes can have a different outlook on life. Of course, add on top of it the psychological and spiritual, right? Because you can go either way on that too when it comes to trauma. Psychologically, or, philosophically, some people think, well, okay, the Buddhists might say this is the way the world is, and I live in this environment and go through it. Spiritually, someone might say, why has God forsaken me? And why am I in this place? What have I done? Why am I being punished? So those are other factors. And some might say, well, God will take me through this, right? Let him take the wheel. And same philosophically, I might say, well, this is part of what's supposed to happen. So there's all these beautiful nuances that we work with in this course and discuss these things. Why do we do that? Well, we do it because then I can have a way better understanding of the person that's in front of me. Like I can look at them and go, you know what? I truly get where you're coming from. I know that your past makes your future. I don't want to live in the bad pieces of it. I want to take you from the here and now and make you more than what you think you can be. That's what compassionate leaders do. I don't know if that answered your roundabout question.
Yeah, I think from what I get from that is that the ACE score or your how you did as a child is still going to impact you, you know. If you're going through an event, you and your neighbor might deal with it totally differently based on how you grew up, is kind of what I get from your comments. So that is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's our unique, who we are uniquely as a person. The other great thing about ACE scores for me, Lenka, is that when we're able to evaluate them and have awareness around them, then we're able to build skills to move past them.
Hmm.
Oh, that's my, for me, it's always my little boy. There's my little boy again. He's feeling really unsafe and insecure right now. So what does he need to feel safe? So I just evaluate for a moment because last time I checked, I was kind of an adult. So it's like, I'm an adult now. Your little guy's okay. So we check and say, what do I need? What's going on for me? What do I need to feel safe in this environment? So our body will always sense things that we won't. So yeah, good, Lenka. Thanks for that question. It's
Thank you.
big. Thanks. Brenda,
Hi,
hi, how are you?
great. Thank you for the information. I wanted to know how would this add on to the trauma-informed program that I completed last, I guess it was, I don't know, early on last year. And,
Um,
and the other half of this is I do want to do some, I received my advanced accreditation in team coaching. So I
oh,
want to be
nice.
able to put some workshops together for resilience and working with, you know, I kind of use resilience because people are getting triggered with trauma. But
Yeah, yeah, right.
then, so how will this help me?
Um, it may not be as big of an advantage if you are looking to get, are you looking to get CCEs for ICF
Well,
accreditation?
I always keep them. Like I have way more than I need, but of course I always keep them.
Yeah. So these particular CCEs are for the CPHR, which is the organizations that does human resources. If you were thinking about adding on to the TICCA, which is the Trauma Advanced, I assume that's what you went through, yes?
Yes.
Yes, if you were thinking about adding on to that, you could talk to Charles about actually looking into the other two courses that we offer that have 40 CCEs each for coaches that are trauma-informed relationship, which is a very interesting course if you're going to be working with couples or in relationship manner, or the trauma-informed group coaching. And that is working with more, more larger groups, and how do we do trauma-informed work within that environment. Those may be more advantageous for you just because you are a coach and seeking CCEs for the Federation, as opposed to the CPHR organization, which is different.
Oh, okay. So I'm in the wrong place then. I
No,
mean,
you're not. You're
I learned
never.
a
You're
lot.
never in the wrong place,
No, no, no,
Brenda.
no, no. I learned a
You're
lot, but
welcomely developing information that you didn't have
I
before.
learned a lot, but it's really about me creating these workshops, team building workshops that's really helping people. So that's where I'm focused on.
Consider the group then. It's a really
Okay.
interesting course, and
Okay.
it will piggyback off of the work that you already learned from the
Okay.
TICC.
Okay, so I will do that then. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brenda. Any other questions or comments? Insights with all of the knowledge that I have in the room?
I'm just going to let Brenda know if in the chat I added a link to the website where we do have those other courses that Brad was talking about. It's the last link that you see in the chat there.
Hello, beautiful Heather Parks down there. It's a face I haven't seen in a while. Are there any other questions that you might have for us today? Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for giving me part of your Friday morning, a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, depending on where you're coming from. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to Charles. If you have any questions for me, oh, there's a question above Anne. Okay, let's see where that is. Will you offer guidance on trauma-informed practices and policies? And we're always here to offer guidance. We do supervision and mentoring. And with these particular courses, what would end up happening is that we can develop a check-in after we have completed them. But I must tell you, and most of the people on this call will know, that our doors always open. So any courses that you take from us, you're able to have meetings with us afterwards. And those can be about whatever it is you seek for knowledge. And again, please reach out to Charles if you have any more questions. Otherwise, have a fantastic Friday, everyone. Take care. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Anne. Enjoy Mexico.
I am. Thank you.
Lori, nice to see you.